Okay, so we're going to take a look at the final tutorial, which brings together a lot of the skills that we've learnt along the way. So we're going to import this Riverbank house strip back file. We're going to have a look at basically keeping the objects, and we're going to keep hierarchy as we've done before, and we'll also fix the UV textures. Now it's quite a big file, so it might take a little while to process the data, but that's looking quite zippy, and that's come in. And because it's the 6th floor, you will notice it's floating up in the air. So the best thing to do is click onto the manager, select the file, and click F to fit to the model. So when we kind of zoom up, we can at least see the entire model itself. And at the moment, it's all come in pretty sort of kind of beige in colour, so which shows me really that the materials from Revit have not actually come through assigned at this stage. Now I didn't see the Revit model, so I'm not quite sure how that was built, but you can see that everything's come through as pretty much uniform material. In fact, it looks like there's at least 2 materials in there. But the good thing is, once we start to drag and drop our things like our glass onto the glass material, that immediately changes and updates. So what I recommend, the first couple of moves really are just sort your walls out, get some glass onto the glass facade there, and make the walls white at least, and potentially maybe just get those doors looking a bit nicer with some timber or some wood. Let's have a little look what else we can use, and probably the floor. Those are the biggest elements to sort out at this stage. So let's put some carpet onto the floor. Just be careful you don't kind of drag it onto a glass panel, as I was doing there. Quite easy to do. Okay, so if you navigate around your model, one of the areas we'd like to look at is this area where there's a cafe and a bit more going on in the corner in the office. So kind of navigate through. And you will notice there's no ceiling as well. So the model's come through with no ceiling. So a little trick here is what we're going to do is select the floor. Just try and click in an area where you're not likely to select something else. Click on the floor, hold shift down, and actually drag a copy of the floor up to create a ceiling. So essentially what we'll do, we'll actually copy that ceiling. So I'm just going to try that again, holding shift down. And let's actually copy. Let's try copy and paste. And copy and paste is a good way. We can do it as a copy rather than an instance. And then what we can actually do is click and move it up in the 3D view. But potentially we might want to go down and open up our panel here and actually kind of rename that ceiling so that we can always find it again in the future. Now when you do rename things in Twinmotion, that's quite helpful because it does mean that you can use the search bar just to find the objects you're looking for. Having a few problems typing. Okay, good. So we've got that called ceiling. We can now turn it on and off. And we might just want to kind of tweak its position. Let's just kind of get inside, kind of see how that looks on the inside. I'm still looking through a bit of glass at the moment, so we're just going to walk forward quite slowly. Yeah, it looks a lot better. You can see we're starting to get a bit more realism with the ceiling coming in there. So I'm going to just pop open the transform panel. And let's click on the side arrow to bring that up. And you will notice in here, you've got the X, Y, and Z coordinates of the selected object. So if we adjust the Z coordinates there, we can just kind of move the ceiling up or down a little bit there, just to fine tune the height of it. I think something like, I don't know, 3.2, 3.3 meters. It's probably a pretty good height for that ceiling. That looks cool. So now what I'm going to do is just pop over to our materials, go to the ceilings library and drag on a ceiling object. And if I kind of scale that up a bit, you'll see this one's quite nice. It's got like 600 by 600 sort of ceiling tiles built into it as well. So it starts to look a lot more realistic already. Okay, so once we've got the basics done, the basic materials, and at least got the ceiling in, the next job is really to start to add a bit more detail in terms of materials to the existing models that have come in from your CAD software, in this case Revit. So you can see that I'm just dragging down onto the various objects, a few different metals and things like that onto maybe some of these chair legs, and immediately we're getting some nice reflectivity and it's starting to look pretty cool. So let's go down and select some wood, and one thing I would say with the woods is a lot of them are geared up for things like flooring and so on. So, you know, you have to look quite hard for actually kind of woods that are more veneer or material based, things like the doors and so on. So let's kind of drag something nicely onto those doors, just get a nice wooden effect on those doors. And it's beginning to start to come together, looking a bit more interesting than certainly when it started out at the beginning, when it was all beige. So just keep navigating around. As I've said before, when you navigate around, you really want to use the keyboard to do this, the WASD keys. You want to use W for moving forward, S for back, A is moving to the right and to the left, and D is moving to the right. When you do move, try and move quite slowly when you're in a space like this. Okay, that's cool. So you can kind of get right in to have a look at the detail. And just move up or down with Q or E. It can be quite sensitive, so I definitely recommend clicking 1 to slow yourself down. Now at the moment you'll notice that I'm dragging the different sort of fabric materials onto individual objects, and that's because I've turned it on to apply to object as opposed to replace material mode, which is a little icon just up on the docks, the first icon where you can see a little circle. So that kind of just makes it a lot easier to play around with the different colours and the materials themselves. So that's looking cool. Yeah, starting to kind of get there. So we'll do a little bit more work. There we go. You see the apply to object or replace material. That does it more globally when we're trying to make big changes to the entire model. Okay, so we'll kind of go back to replace to material. And when I drag that, you'll notice that both chairs changed in that circumstance. So it's always a good idea to save your progress as we go. It's nothing worse than kind of having to redo work if we do get a crash or a problem. So I do recommend just keep saving every 5, 10, 15 minutes, whatever suits you. So we kind of just save that into this particular folder here. Give it a name that you can obviously find again in the future. And it's always a good idea to create your Twinmotion projects in a separate file, I would recommend as well. Okay, so let's carry on with the tutorial. Let's go back to keep applying some different materials. And it's really worth trying out all the different types of materials. We're going to go for a slightly sort of worn coppery material there, which I think looks pretty funky. We're going to try out some of the plastic materials as well. These can be quite nice. They're quite nice and sort of translucent, with a little bit of shine to them potentially. That kind of nice like glossy plastic finish you might get onto the kitchen. Now do bear in mind all of this is going to look a little bit different once we get onto things like lighting. So kind of just drag a few different materials onto those particular panels. And you can see we can increase the scale of the texture there just to get a bit more going on. Keep using the libraries. Let's have a quick look at the lighting now. So I'm just going to drag in an area light to begin with, kind of boost up the intensity, and you can see that's a really good choice for nice linear lighting, things like that under the countertop lighting there. The linear light's a really great choice for that kind of thing, and it's really nice and easy just to adjust the colour as we've done before. Omni lights are a good choice for general illumination, but I think what I'm looking for here is some spotlights. So good tip here, drag them onto the floor, then move them dynamically up, potentially change the angle a little bit, and then maybe turn the shadows on, and kind of move it up a little bit more to position it, and then drag it across to the place where you're looking kind of to position the light. So let's duplicate this light. Let's hold down the Shift key and try and drag it off on axis, and that means we can create a number of instances. Select the number of instances and you'll notice that all of them have the same colour coding. See that little blue bar? That means they're all instances of the same light. So if you change one, they'll all change. Now I've just created a little folder by right clicking to create something called a container. And then I'm going to drag those into that folder. And that's a really nice way that you can manage your lights all in one go, turn them all on and off. And also it makes it a bit easier for you to kind of select them as well. So I'm just going to drag off that entire group, but I want to do it on axis this time, just so I can get it nicely. And again, I'll kick a couple of duplicates as well, just so we get kind of a bit more light going on over that table. So yep, that looks really cool. And again, all of those lights can be dragged into the lights folder. So if I want to, I can turn them all off in one go. And it's very easy for me to edit one of them. They're all the same instance, so one adjustment will mean they will all adjust at the same time. So it does make life a lot easier. It also probably keeps the file size down a bit because they're instances as opposed to unique copies in this case. So have a little play around with the lighting angles. just so it starts to look a little bit brighter and illuminated in here. Sometimes having shadows on can look a little bit weird actually if you have lots of different lights. So again, just play around to see whether it looks better or worse with the lighting. So let's now look at a different type of IES light. Let's drag a different one in here. You'll notice that IES lights all have different sort of photometric patterns. And if you do want to, actually, you can load in specific IES files if it's important for you to be sort of really realistic with your lighting, and actually kind of load in the exact IES file that maybe you're thinking of using on the project. So I'm just going to tweak the position of this light a little bit more. And I'm just going to hold the shift key down and drag off. And again, let's do a specific spacing. And let's bunch up the number of copies. Let's go right down that corridor with a whole different kind of bunch of copies, if we can. Click OK. Fantastic. You see we've copied lights all down the corridor in really just a couple of clicks. So I do like playing around with the IES lights. And one thing I do recommend is you just kind of position those on the wall. That's cool. And then what you can do is just select those three. Even though they're not instances, it's very easy to select them all and just kind of globally adjust the ones that are selected. And then what's really nice is, you know, those all kind of form a really good sort of backdrop once we maybe get onto perhaps our decorations. And we drag maybe some sort of pictures or some photographs onto the wall, just to kind of add a bit more decorative effect to this scene. And Twinmotion does come with some really quite nice little decorations. And of course, there's nothing to stop you making more of your own as well. So just going to pan around here. And I think what we'll do is kind of like let's have a look, what do we need? Let's think about how we can make this scene look a bit more interesting. I think we'll go to home. Let's go to decorations again. And let's get some nice big sort of pictures and artwork for the end of this this space here. Let's drag the multicoloured llama in. Always important. Let's drag a couple of pictures in. Now you can actually replace the artwork here. If you were to click T for texture, to click onto the artwork, you could actually change the image if needed. But as I say, it's just a starting point. I do like the things like the electronic appliances. These are kind of nice for office situations. There's laptops, phones, tablets, headphones, all the kind of things that you would probably find. Now, one thing you do notice, when I move up above the ceiling, it's single-sided at the moment, so that's quite handy in that it will only show from below. So in certain situations, when you're just above, you can actually see through the ceiling, so that I can kind of work on the model. That's actually really handy in this situation. So I'm just kind of adding a few more props, a few more phones and things like this, just to kind of bring the scene to life. And this is definitely where Twinmotion starts to win hands down in terms of speed. Having a built-in library of all this stuff is fantastic, but it is just a starting point. As I've said many times, you must build your own user library as you go, which does take a little bit of time, but then again, you can share that with your colleagues and friends. There we go, that's a nice MacBook Pro that I'm using at the moment to do my training and my videos. Just spin that around, kind of make it look a bit more natural. So yeah, let's kind of frame up the scene a little bit here. That's looking quite nice for a view. And I think we'll kind of just tweak and adjust. And what I'm going to see if I can do is just get a nice natural looking view. And I think I'll decide to replace the llama with a big screen telly. That seems like a good spot for a TV. Let's make it a bit bigger. So we'll click 6 and we'll kind of get the scale option. Maybe zoom in a little bit there so I can see. So 6, click on the middle, and then I should be able to scale in all directions. It can be a bit sensitive sometimes, so just be a bit careful there. I think what else do we need to finish this off? I think we need a few more different types of materials. So I'm going to click on the TV screen. I'm going to go to video, and this is a really cool new function that they've got. So you can actually apply videos or MP4 files, and you can click open to actually open your own video. So, you know, when you're doing a job for a client, you can actually open their own promotional videos potentially, which will certainly be a nice touch for them to impress. You can scale it, but there's not really much need. And you'll notice even on that little laptop screen, if I click T for texture, I can drag on the image itself. And let's just increase the glow here. So I'm just going to reset the scale on the video screen on the back wall, mess that up for some reason. And what I can actually do, if I do want to, I can click T for texture. Let's sample that video sample. And then I'm going to click open. As I said, it's really nice to maybe think about using your own client's promotional videos. I've done this a few times. So this is one that I kind of recently did for a winery in California, actually. I was doing some 3D visuals, if I can just remember where it is. There it is, the Road Runner movie. They make all sorts of champagne and beautiful wines up in the region of California. Now you can see that I've actually got their own company promo video playing in the background. That will certainly be something that I'm sure will impress your clients. So definitely a nice little touch. Now, I'm going to kind of change the lighting a little bit and slide through the different day times. But it doesn't always work that we can get the light coming through the window. And of course, this depends a little bit on the orientation of the project. So although I do want day, I want the lights coming through the windows. That's not working at the moment. So a good little tip here is to go to your location. So let's go on location and just change the north offset. So essentially all we're really doing is spinning the kind of model around almost. Not actually changing its location, we're just changing the north offset to simulate the different angles so that we can kind of get the sun coming deep into the model. And that's really nice, just to kind of get more sunlight coming into the windows there at that particular sort of midday. I'm also going to change the background just to make something a little bit more suitable. Probably urban background is probably the right one here. Let's go for that one actually. Could do with a few more backgrounds, but you can actually load your own in, and you can actually download a whole bunch of sky domes which have different backgrounds as well. So it's worth looking out for those. Okay, so we'll just do another save. Let's kind of keep working. Now, if you think we've only been working for 17, 18 minutes, and it's starting to look pretty cool already. So let's click onto our textures and let's kind of just increase the glow of our ceiling a little bit. That makes everything look a little bit brighter in the model, for sure. A little bit more cheerful. I do think we need a few more lights, so I'm just going to kind of try seeing if we can kind of boost up the lighting a little bit more here. Going to go for an area light. And the good thing with area lights is they can be set to length and width. And they can make quite a big difference actually if you increase the length and the width a bit. Let's get the intensity right up. And you can see it is making a bit of a difference. Get the attenuation up as well. Maybe not as much as I was hoping for, but definitely worth a try. And quite subtle, the things like the shadows as well. So definitely try the area lights. There definitely can be quite a good choice for things like ceiling tiles and so on as well. Another really good way to make things like glowing ceiling tiles is to do a little trick where you actually drag in a primitive plane. And using the transform, we can just kind of scale that down a tiny bit to get it to the right size. So I'm just kind of broadly putting in some scale factors here. Kind of move it broadly into the middle. Just sort of tweak the size a tiny bit more. Let's just kind of scale that back in a tiny bit more there. Yep, that's looking pretty good. And then when we're happy, what we can actually do is go to materials. There's some really great neon materials. So these do various things from sort of emitting light to actually flashing, but you'll see that gives a nice kind of glow to that ceiling tile. So again, if we rename that something appropriate, let's call that ceiling tile, ceiling light, then we can basically hold shift down, click on the axis, drag off a copy to the next position. Let's kind of place it maybe a couple of tiles away and duplicate it a bunch of times. Let's just click 3. Cool. And then we can basically select all of them and do the same thing across the scene. So I think what we'll do is kind of just move those one tile across, click OK, and then we'll do the same, kind of go another tile across there. And you can see that creates really quite a nice realistic sort of light emitting sort of tile, if you like, on the ceiling. So that's a very good choice, trying to use the neon materials for this kind of thing. That looks a lot more interesting visually, I think. And again, if you do want to, we can put all of those in a group. So create a container, let's call that ceiling, and then we'll drag those into that. So you always have to kind of just click and move the container just above, ever so slightly. There it is. Let's select all of those with the shift key, drag them all into ceiling. And again, that nicely kind of organises them. We can turn them all on and off, and it makes it a lot easier to select them all and maneuver them as a group if we wanted to. Okay, good. So let's kind of carry on with having a look at just refining this scene a little bit more now at this stage. So I think we'll just save before we kind of carry on. As I say, always a good idea to keep saving at regular intervals. Just have a little pause, look at the scene, just review it, and just kind of get a feel for where you might go next. So I think we're going to just work on the lighting a little bit more. Just going to drag some more lights in under this counter here. And again, let's kind of change that beam angle. Let's get that intensity right up so we can see the IES sort of, should we say, photometric data coming through. We're going to hold shift down, a little bit fiddly, but let's kind of see if we can copy that light across a bunch of times. And we'll add a few more duplicate copies in here. And that's nice. We just get a nice little bit more detail going along the underside of that counter, just lighting up that beautifully reflective countertop that we're using there for fun. Good. Okay, so if you look into the office and accessories, you will find all sorts of additional things there. Lots of things like kind of papers, pens, coffee cups, that sort of thing. Just extra props, really, just to add like a lot more realism to office space scenes. Yeah, it kind of just makes a big difference, really, in terms of the graphics. Just have a bit of visual interest to fix onto. So, you know, when you're propping out, you know, obviously looking at the interior design is one aspect, but it is quite nice just to add some extra detail just to make the scene come alive a little bit. So even things like coffee cups, you will find here, and just kind of add a few of those around the scene, as you would find in most offices, but, you know, a few messy coffee cups left lying around by the staff that were there, as usual. That's cool. Good. Okay, so what we'll do, I think we'll kind of spin round and we'll begin to kind of like just work on this scene a little bit more. I do want to show you that you can actually drag in different chairs. There's a bit of a library of those, and kind of carry on with a few more accessories. Yeah, sometimes you just got to try these things out and see if it looks good or not. Just kind of keep working on the scene. We'll also find under accessories things like maybe it being appropriate for the office setting, some wine. And some of those things are grouped together as well. Let's get some bread onto that countertop. Maybe a couple of donuts or loaves of bread, that sort of thing. So yeah, the food library is okay. It's not exhaustive, but there's plenty there. Things like apples, pears, and that kind of thing. So I think, you know, you've got to kind of like have a look at this model. And when you kind of click, you see that if you double click, you go into the group. So with these, some of them are grouped together. So it's worth looking at them. So for example, those plate groups, you know, you can basically open them up and get into the group, and then, you know, let's put a pizza onto that particular plate. Again, let's scale that pizza down. It's a little bit big for one person maybe. So we'll scale that down. Perfect. That's looking cool. Okay, so you can see how we can kind of really make the scene start to come alive, make it a lot more vibrant, a lot more interesting. Good old banana, the office worker's favourite snack, probably. Let's drag in a few other items here. But yeah, it's really just good to show you the different sort of libraries and what you might expect. So where else should we go? Let's go and have a look at things like floor lamps, quite a few of those. But it really is just a starting point. As I've said many, many times, you must build your user library. But the great thing is some 3D software really doesn't come with many assets at all. And you pretty much have to create everything right from scratch. So let's drag some wood down onto this little gaming table here. Let's kind of maybe go to, I think, probably fabrics. Get maybe a nice kind of green colour onto the side there of that little football table. And again, changing the colorization and tweaking that each individual color is a really cool factor. So one material really, you know, actually can be lots of different types of material. Let's get a bit of chrome onto there. We'll click replace material again. So actually when we replace, it replaces all of them, not just the individual object as such. Let's kind of zoom in a bit here. Maybe go to the plastics. Let's kind of get a few different kind of plastics going on these little kind of table football figures, just for a bit more detail there. It's starting to look quite interesting. The lighting's definitely so much better than when we started. I think we need a bit of visual interest in this room here, because when we do the view looking back, we will see this room. So let's kind of work on this table, get rid of that horrible yellow side. Let's go for materials again. I think we'll go for the nice shiny table. Always looks really cool when you get loads of reflections and things. I think we'll kind of add maybe a few more props and things. Let's go to decorations, grab a few pictures for the wall. Maybe a nice sort of travel scene there. And just drag that one into the scene. So you can see it really does begin to come alive. I think what we'll do in this particular space, as well as working on the lighting a bit more, so we'll just drag in a few of those. Let's kind of change the beam angle, get the intensity right up as well. Let's click 4 just to get our move icon back up again. Just move that up a tiny bit there. Yeah, hold shift down. Let's kind of slide that down. Obviously that wall's at a bit of an angle. So you can see essentially they're dropping down. They're not quite horizontal, but that's kind of okay. We can basically click on them. Yeah, let's do one, click OK. Let's just move that up a little bit as we go. Just try and getting it aligned to the wall. Sometimes a bit fiddly, you've got to hold shift down, just kind of make sure you kind of get that copy as opposed to just actually moving the original. That looks a lot nicer, definitely. Excellent. So I think what we'll do now is we'll go and add a few plants. Now the plants are pretty nice, plants in pots. Again, decent selection of these. And that's where Twinmotion definitely, you know, things like the natural materials and the trees and those sort of things will make a big difference. In fact, we may need to work on the outside area a little bit as we get further into the tutorial, just to kind of make the view through the window look a bit better. So we'll come back and look at that a bit later. So yeah, let's just keep dragging from some of the materials that we've already used already. There's no need to drag them in again. We may as well sample and just drag them in from the little dock area where the materials in the scene that we've used are available. Again, do remember that you can kind of just darken or lighten the colour of pretty much every material and texture here. So, you know, what might seem a more limited library is actually very expansive once you realise you can amend all the different characteristics of them. Okay, so in this part of the scene, we're going to add some humans. Now, these are quite nice in Twinmotion 2020. There's 2 different types of humans. These are the static ones, the posed ones. And the good thing with the posed ones is they're pretty realistic. These are made by XYZ company, which specialises in sort of digital humans. And you can see there's all sorts of poses. We've got like a guy sat down there. Bit tricky, but hopefully we can kind of spin him round, get him to look fairly natural in terms of sort of sat in that chair at the table. Got to be quite careful when you put them into chairs, but that looks, from a distance, that looks really good. There's a bit more activity going on in that office now. Let's kind of work on this one the same way. So again, drag in a couple of different sort of typical people. This guy's still wearing his coat, but that's okay if he's in the corner there. Let's kind of let this lady know. I'm not sure she's the right one with the luggage. Looks like she's travelling. We'll get rid of her. So yeah, this chap's doing a bit of work on his laptop. So let's spin him around. Grab the move. Sort of try and move him in. Just make sure you don't kind of crash him in front of those arms of the chair, because those are the sort of details that you'll only really notice when you render out the images and the animations. And that can be a little bit annoying to have to come back and re-render those later. So let's go for a bit more artwork, I think, onto the wall. Yeah, that's pretty cool. Maybe a bit small, actually. Let's go for something a little bit larger. Some of these posters and things are quite nice. So travel posters, a book on the table. You get the idea. It's just basically adding more interest, some magazines there, to the scene, so that when you're kind of looking from a distance, that's cool. Some nice sort of travel posters here, especially at the moment when we're not sort of travelling as much. But, you know, you can see how fast it begins to come to life. Let's add a few more plants in. I do particularly like this one here, the Golden King. It's got a really nice pot to it, and it's just be careful it doesn't sort of stick to surfaces. So you do have to keep navigating around. We'll pop that into the corner. Let's just get this chap here and move him into the gap there. So that's looking cool. That makes a big difference to the interest of the scene. Just have a little bit more going on there. Okay, so I think we'll do same thing with this area here, but just kind of before we do, I think we need to kind of do a bit of work outside. You can see it's pretty much in the middle of nowhere at the moment. So the very first thing we'll do, go back to our materials, and let's kind of get some nicer kind of ground. So I'm just going to go for something a bit softer, more grassy, potentially. And now what I'm going to do is click on the urban dock. And this is really interesting. What I'm going to try and do is search, and I'm going to type in, let's go for London. So I'm going to search for an area of London. And what we can do is basically kind of move the map to the position we're interested in. When we click on the grab box, you might think that you could change the size of the grab, but you actually can't. So what you do is you simply zoom in or zoom out and manipulate the size of the map. When you're ready, you click grab. Now that'll take a few moments, but you can actually basically download from OpenStreetMap the 3D data for quite a lot of the cities worldwide. London's pretty well mapped, so if you're working in London, that's fine. You can see it takes a few moments to download. But this is a great way to kind of grab some generic context. And it's definitely a fun thing to play with by putting your actual building into its real context. So obviously we're just messing around at this stage with this particular tutorial. So hopefully that will be downloaded shortly. And then what we can do, here we go, let's just finish now. You can see when I zoom out, it's quite a big chunk of context. So if I scroll down to the bottom, here it is. I can turn it all on and off as one big group. And it's come in, it's even got some sort of trees and things. That's really nice. So that's really cool. And I can basically just click and move it around. So I'm just going to kind of move it around to an appropriate point so that we get a bit of a view out that window, kind of looking into, what might be some other buildings. So they're just sort of block modelled. Let's kind of move that a tiny bit more. Let's rotate it around just for a bit more interest, I think. Yeah, just be careful on the height there. That's fine, absolutely fine. So what we'll do, maybe we will copy the buildings. So you can change the height of those buildings just by clicking on the slider. And that's cool, just bring them up a tiny bit there. And what we can do is basically click on them. We could just copy them out of here. So which one should we go for? Let's select this one here, hold shift down. Let's just drag out that block here. And we'll kind of rotate that round just to give us a bit of visual interest outside of the view from that cafe. And we can raise it up a little bit here. So, hopefully when we're in the room, we will actually have something that looks a little bit more realistic. Bear in mind that this room is a 6th floor, so it's sort of floating up. So just kind of navigate back broadly where we were. Just adjust the speed a little bit here. Just kind of review those spaces. So that's good. Now you can actually see when we look outside, you've got something that looks a bit more like a building outside. And a bit more context, really. So what we're going to do at this stage is create an image. And the reason I'm going to do that is it's good to have an image to go back to. Because when you're kind of working outside, just simply click on my image and I can actually go back to that particular view. So let's do a bit more work on the context before we go back inside. Very rapidly, I'm just going to review with you how we can drag in the trees. And you can see there's a really good library of trees that ship with Twinmotion. So let's kind of just scroll back up, try and feel something that would fit well into London. It's kind of, it's hard to decide sometimes. Let's go for one of those. And we'll click age and we can kind of basically scale it up quite dramatically. So I'm going to hold shift down, copy it a number of times. I'm going to leave them as instances. So if I do adjust one, they'll all adjust. But the good thing is there is a slight variety, even though they're instances, in the different sort of size and rotation. So let's add a few more of these types of trees. Again, I love the new growth slider. I think that's a really cool factor of Twinmotion itself. We'll just sort of drag those a little bit more randomly around. Cool. Okay, that's looking nice. Maybe one or two more trees. I think we're done. So let's hold shift down. Let's kind of drag something off a bit closer. Maybe like an avenue of trees down here.